My job on the Overwatch team is to work with all the sound designers on the project to kind of provide a lot of the character and the immersion and a lot of the gameplay information that players need, but we portray all that through sound. And so I work with a very talented team of sound designers to get to kind of craft these worlds, these heroes, these abilities, and do it in a sonic way that has unique signatures and are uniquely identifiable to players so that they can tell what's happening at any time just through sound. In a game like this, sound is incredibly important because it gives you all the information that you can't see that's happening off screen. So it's providing lots of detailed information about who's doing what, where they're doing it, and do I need to worry about it. When it comes to map audio, it's very much just like creating a bed that you get to play in. It's part of the immersion. It helps set the player so that they feel like they're in the world. And a lot of the sounds can also kind of tell you where you are in the map, location-wise, or if events are happening. We try to use some of the environmental sounds to also inform about some of the gameplay events. Like, I can tell you if that sounds Overwatch or not, but I couldn't tell you why. And that is sometimes a struggle, where it's like early on I knew that there were never going to be tire screeches, brake squeals, car alarms, horn honks. None of that fits the vision of Overwatch. It's always that it's more of an aspirational kind of sound. It's like the environments you want to someday get to live in. And so I think maybe it was more about excluding sounds from the landscape and from the palette than it was a conscious decision to include them. We're always trying to be super unique in terms of signature sounds, especially for hero design. Again, for locations, we try to make sure that it's appropriate for the setting, but that if you were to idle your screen and sit there for 30 minutes, you would never be annoyed by it. It should be something that is just so part of the environment and just you feel so immersed in it that you don't realize that it was there, that it just feels right. And those are the kind of goals that we go for. And so whenever anything rubs against you the wrong way, like, ooh, after 30 minutes of that one sound is bugging me, well, it's gone. People have an idea of what things sound like, whether it's a grenade launcher that goes whoomp, not quite right, but that's what everyone thinks they sound like, so we do it. Because you got to meet the expectations. So there's always kind of this give and take in terms of what's authentic, what meets expectations, what delivers on the story and the gameplay needs. And we try to find that sweet spot that kind of satisfies everyone. So when we start on a new map, the process is to get together with the environment art team and kind of see what their vision is for the new location. And then we start looking for different kind of landmarks that would have unique sounds that represent the city or the culture. And then we try to source the appropriate sounds to make sure that we're being authentic to the region and represent the town in a way that the people that live there would recognize. But also to just be respectful to the different people and culture that we're trying to portray in the game, and to make sure to do it in a way that is authentic, in a way that they would recognize as their own home. There are definitely sounds specific to regions. You can think about a map like Lunar Horizon. No one's been there, so we had a lot of freedom to kind of craft it the way that we thought that we needed to. Even like the mech factory in Volskaya, we didn't have to go to Russia to kind of represent a big industrial complex that built robots. But when you get to a map like Paris, and it's a city that's one of the most widely known in the world, it's very iconic visually, and also sonically has a lot of signature sounds that any movie, any game that goes there, you expect that you're going to hear. The bells of Notre Dame. You can't just put any bells in there, it has to be those bells. And while we could maybe look for sound effects libraries that cover a lot of what we want, it's often a lot faster and easier to get the actual sounds that are recorded with your goal in mind, rather than trying to take sounds that don't quite work and force them to work. When working on a new map, we'll get an early look at it several months before we actually start working on it, and that's just kind of time for us to incubate ideas and think about what we're going to do and if we're going to have to reach out to get any sort of help with recording the sources. But we really don't dig into it until it has been well play tested, kind of the geometry is all set in place, and we know what the layout is going to be, and then that's when the sound team gets involved. One of the things that we couldn't find in libraries were all the open markets, the outdoor cafes, people living life. Like, that's what Paris is about, and that's the what we asked our friends in Versailles to go out and capture for us, to kind of give us the living Paris sounds. So to get the really authentic sounds of the Paris markets and the cafes, we contacted our Versailles office. And we asked them if they could go out and spot locations that would kind of offer the types of sounds that we were looking for, and then to work with a local field recordist to go out and record these sounds for us. And there was a little bit of back and forth in terms of what we wanted to get. And luckily, there was one day where it wasn't raining, because weather at this time of year was a big problem, and there was just a very small window. But I can't give enough credit to the folks in Versailles and the recordists that they worked with, because they sent us 41 different files of amazing recordings for us to mine through, and then we could populate throughout the map to really give Paris that living sound. So what was really neat about this arrangement is that we sent a list of sounds that we wanted, from rooftops and balconies and plazas, a few requirements like please no water fountains, please no music playing from the cafe. And what they did that was really above and beyond is not only did they provide the recordings that we asked for, but they sent us back photos of the location. So mentally we could have a picture of where they were. And then they also put pinpoints on the maps so that we could see, kind of where these sounds were on the actual Parisian map. Which was really helpful for us in terms of informing kind of how to lay out the sounds layer by layer throughout the level. The sound of Paris that I didn't expect was pigeons. There's lots of pigeons. And that was actually mentioned in kind of the phone conversation that we had with them. They said, oh, if you're going to do Paris, you got to have pigeons. So we're going to make sure there's enough pigeons, just not that they get in the way. The other unique sounds were definitely the markets and the cafes. Obviously, hearing lots of people speaking in their native tongue in French wasn't something we could easily create here. And when you play in our maps, you'll notice you never see any people, but they're living maps. Everything's happening a block away, 2 blocks away. And so we were able to take these recordings and then manipulate them in a way where it sounds like everything's just beyond your view. And again, that was not something we could accomplish using library sounds. And so reaching out to the Versailles office and working with people on the ground in Paris was really instrumental in making a successful map. Real world Paris, I haven't, I visited about 25 years ago, but it's such an old city, I don't think it has changed that much. But what I do recall is there were a lot of impatient drivers, always honking horns, lots of scooters. It's somewhat of a noisy city. People living life is kind of the way I view Paris. And there's everyone enjoying the plazas and the parks and strolling on the sidewalks and enjoying fine restaurants. That's kind of the Paris that we wanted to capture. Our Overwatch version of Paris, it takes all the hard edges away from the city, but gives it an environment where you could relax in. It's got all the beautiful elements. It's soothing, but very, very rich in terms of the life that's being lived. I mean, I think that was kind of the theme there, is that it's just such a city full of vitality and history. It's very lived in. It's going to continue that way. And so having a lot of activity and voices without the kind of noisier side of Paris was what we were going for. So the chance to get to work with other Blizzard offices, this is only the second time that we've had this opportunity. We first tried this in the Busan map. So we contacted the Korean office and had very successful results. And we've just been lucky that some of the locations happen to align where Blizzard has a presence nearby. Dorado is another good example where that's a very lived-in map. And so it was important to have festivals and people, the outdoor activity And really, it was like there was a festival right there in the courtyard. And in that case, I was able to leverage some sounds when I was in Guatemala of a big outdoor party that I recorded. And then that became part of the ambience of Dorado and Castillo. And some of these other maps where we need to have some of the language as part of the ambience, that's where it gets tricky. Because we do need to get new recordings that kind of cover the settings that we want, but without any of the music in a restaurant, without any of the water fountains in the parks. There's certain things when you're in a city that seem right, but they're terrible in a recording. You can't take them out. So we were able to ask the Versailles office to make sure that anything they recorded was kind of within that spec. Generally, each map has 200 to 300 different sounds. A lot of those are either the emitters that we place that kind of are for immersive purposes, but then many of the maps also have unique physics objects that you can interact with. So in the Paris map, there's a piano that you will be able to play. And so I had to go sample a bunch of piano notes to make sure that it was covered, because I don't know which note you're going to hammer or shoot. Also, whether certain maps have different types of vases or kegs that you interact with, or boxes and crates and doors, and so all of those really kind of start to bloat the asset count, and so it's not hard to get to 300 to 400 sounds.